What's going on, everyone? Seth Miranda here, coming to you from the Streamlab right here at Adorama. Jumping on here because I've got the Z9 here, but it's not just any Z9. It's a Z9 with the Firmware 2.0 update. That firmware we heard about from the original announcement of the Z9 with all these promises of like mysterious updates and improvements. Well, Nikon delivered, and there's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. So we're gonna do a quick overview and try to break down the key improvements and updates, and there's a lot of segments to break it down into. So let's start off with the overall, what I feel affects both photo and video and just the camera itself as a whole. One thing off the bat is the EVF, which was 60 frames per second, now gets a boost of 120 frames per second if you want it. If you want a smoother frame rate, or if you want to keep it at 60 to maybe save battery life, I'd imagine it would be the reason for that. You have that ability to do so, but it just shows that firmware can do a lot. It's the hardware that you buy, and the firmware just keeps on accelerating and enhancing that hardware, and that's what the firmware seems to be proving right off the bat with the EVF refresh rate. The other things you get improvements on are the white balance and autofocus improvement. Yeah, if you were already happy with the autofocus that came out of the Z9 like I was, because I've had my own personal Z9 for 3 months now and I haven't had any problems with the autofocus. Well, this apparently has autofocus improvements, and a lot of people that have been trying out the firmware have been stating that they are noticing a big difference in it, especially for tracking like wildlife and things like that. So it's nice to see that it wasn't just a bunch of different features, but overall improvements on the Z9 itself. Now, talking about autofocus, one of the really crazy things as far as the stills goes, you have now 20 customizable autofocus points. What does that mean? Well, it's autofocus area really. So you can actually dial in a customizable shape for both vertical and horizontal to create the customizable size of the autofocus area you want. Not just small, not just large, not just single point, but really whatever you want it to be. And you can save it to a custom bank. So you can actually set it and then just go right to those settings that you like. So if you think the small was a little too small and the large was just not there for you, you can make it the shape and size that you want, whether it be vertical across the plane or horizontal across the plane. Really useful if you're someone that's super particular like that, or knowing exactly what you're getting into with the shot. Now, there's a lot to talk about with the stills, but one of the key and like probably most prominent new additions to the Z9 with this firmware update is the pre and post cap. What is that? Well, this is a feature, first of all, that we've seen only in micro four thirds because it's a smaller sensor, less data for the camera to handle, or when it was in a full frame camera at significantly less resolution and with a crop. Well, this is full 46 megapixels and full frame the entire sensor. Pre-cap pretty much means that if you are going to have to press the shutter before you take the shot, it will store up to 0.3, 0.5, or a full second of shots, which means if you're doing 30 frames per second, it'll store 30 frames before you take the shot. And if you're doing burst mode, which is what that is really meant for, it'll take a second of shots or whatever you set it to, then the shot, and then post capture, after you get that shot off, it'll still keep recording frames up to 1, 2, 3, or 4 seconds after you take the shot. So if you're trying to get something that's very of the moment sensitive, if you're a sports shooter, right? Or someone that just gets anxious, if you're not sure you're gonna hit that shutter soon enough, if you're not sure if you're gonna let your finger off that shutter too soon, it's got you covered. So you're gonna get that shot before, during, and after the moment that you're trying to shoot whatever you're trying to get. For photojournalists, this is incredible. You can be more assertive knowing that you're not going to miss the key moments that you're not even sure are going to be there, right? It's things that happen right after you took that frame that you didn't even see coming. Your camera's got you covered, which is pretty incredible, especially since it is the full res and full frame of this sensor. That is very, very impressive, and really interesting that they even thought to put that in the Z9, and it just shows you how impressive the hardware in the Z9 is, right? So that to me is something that we haven't seen before, and we also haven't seen a lot of the video features. Now I'm gonna get into those video features in a second, but also with some other little quirky things you get in there. When you put it on bulb, if you're doing long exposure, someone that shoots stars, for example, right? If you're doing nighttime landscapes, something like that, you actually get a count up timer. It lets you know how long it's been recording that shot for, which is pretty useful for people out there that are doing that type of photography. And if you want to talk about like really crazy, it has like this weird overlay blend mode. Yeah, so let's say you're shooting like a skater and you're stagnant. Your camera is stable and the skater's coming in and out of frame doing a trick, right? Well, what this allows you to do is take all those frames from the burst and actually overlay them so that you have a stagnant environment and you have the skater overlaid in post in the camera. So you're kind of eliminating the post work after the fact, which is what? Like, yeah, so you got the pre-cap, the post-cap, the blend mode. You got action pretty well covered, including the autofocus improvements and everything else. They didn't forget about you on the video side either. So let's get into the video side of things. One of the first things I'll let you know is you can actually assign buttons for 2 speeds of autofocus. So if you want that slow rack of focus for that cinematic look, or if you're working on the fly, need something fast to snap to a different subject, you can actually map them different buttons. So you're not messing around with menus, you're shooting. You're able to go fast when you need it, slow when you want it, have creative control, and like use it as a tool when you need to if you're photojournalistic. So I think that's really incredible that they even thought to do that. Plus, you have a new GUI for you video shooters out there, which means you have a table of all your settings and everything accessible. You know exactly what you're at and what you're shooting and how you're shooting it right there on that screen. To make things a little easier, again, they gave you a record like rectangle around the edge of the frame so that you know when you're recording, it's just nice and visible and you know you are recording. You have to look for like a little red dot or something like that. A nice little touch, right? But they really went all in on the video for this one. They really are pushing this almost handheld cinema thing going on here. So we know about the 8K ProRes RAW internal 12-bit 60 frames per second ability, right? That was the headliner, but there's a lot more to this. In fact, the 4K is actually oversampled from 8K. So you have the best possible 4K you can get out of this full frame sensor here, which is pretty remarkable. But as far as the NRAW video goes, which is the new Nikon RAW video, which is going to be a .nev file, like NEF is the stills, I think that's Nikon electronic file. This is Nikon electronic video, I'm going to assume. But you do have 8.3K, 60 frames per second, 24 frames per second. I'm going to read from my phone so that I'm super accurate here. I'm sorry, guys. 4.1K at 120, 60, 30, and 24 frames at full sensor. You're not cropping, you're not doing some weird format. You're able to use the entire sensor here. Now with 5.3, 60, 30, and 24, you can do that at a 1.5 DX crop, okay? Now, the other thing I'm going to let you guys know is you have ISO control, a little enhancement here. You have 1/6 EV ability. So instead of just the 1/3 stops, you have 1/6 stops. So you need that super fine tuning of ISO. You have that for video capability here in the new Z9 Firmware 2.0. Also the shutter speed, yeah, so you can actually slow down the shutter speed slower than the frame rate. So if you want to get that blurry dreamy effect, you can totally do that. Or if you're in a low light situation where you're just trying to do anything you can to get more light into your camera, you have that ability. So you're no longer just like shackled to frame rate shutter speed. You can go below the frame rate with the shutter speed if you want to do that for creative control, or just to have that ability to get the light in the camera, which also they're just thinking of ways that you're going to use this, want to use this, or trying to be able to get what you need to get out there in the field, and they're giving you as many tools as they can, including new tools like waveforms. We haven't seen that before with Nikon. Well, you have waveforms with the new firmware on the Z9, along with that GUI and some other things. There's a lot going on in this camera. I'm sure there's things that aren't even listed there, or little tiny micro details, or just overall improvements and bug squashy type stuff that we're not even getting to. But just so you guys know, this is a very quick overview. We'll see what we can do in the future with actually getting it in the field and doing some stuff with it. But right now, this seems like a very, very impressive free firmware update for Z9 users and just Nikon paying attention to their flagship in general. And this isn't the only thing that's getting in an update. It looks like the Z6 II and Z7 II, you are not forgotten. You're not forgotten. I'm a Z6 II guy as well. There seems to be an autofocus improvement update and some other fixes for the Z6 II and 7 II in a firmware update as well. And if you really want to get a little crazy, it looks like there is like a Cine remote grip that's coming out for the Z9, so you can further develop the kit that you're building with the Z9 for video Cine type use, which is pretty interesting, right? So you're going to get functionality, both interface, hardware, and you're going to have add-on ability to customize the actual kit itself. Overall, I mean, this is not an underwhelming release for firmware update. It is a free update, and it's pretty much what Nikon said it was going to be, if not more. I mean, I didn't see that pre-cap coming. And if you're wondering when you can upgrade your Z9, go check out Nikon's download center for the Z9. It'll be ready on April 20th. You can just download right there, get on your card, update your camera, you're good to go. Let me know down below what feature you're super psyched on, if there was anything listed that really piqued your interest. If there's something that, I don't know, just didn't make sense to you, hit me with a question down below in the comments. I will do my best to answer it. But for now, if you guys want to have like the hard specs, hit the link down below. We'll give you the link to the 100% like data tables of the firmware. But for now, don't forget to hit subscribe, hit like, share this video around. We will see you next time. Later. And of course, they didn't put the one thing I asked for in here, which I thought was coming after all those press releases of the cat meow shutter sound. So hearts broken all across the world.